Good morning, y'all. Welcome to another episode of the Focus Daily Show. Today, we'll be continuing with
Benjamin Rush was a prominent doctor, especially when
this yellow fever. Last episode, we spoke about how after the census and locating certain black communities and strongholds within the land, they released a biological weapon upon the people. We watched a little portion of a film. Today we'll continue that film. But as always, before we begin, I'd like to give all praises due to the Most High and His Son, Jesus Christ. It is through them that this truth is being offered for a chance for grace and redemption for all. All right, let's get straight into it. Short episode today, folks. Just finish up this film. And let's go.
You can easily train yourself to listen faster.
it came to fighting yellow fever. He took
Bag it up a little bit right here.
money and supplies from concerned Philadelphians and Americans in other cities.
Death and grief. It pervades nearly every house in the city.
Okay, once again, let me set the mode. Rather than choosing to attack and lose resources and lives behind destroying black communities and disenfranchising black communities or forts or whatever they was labeling them, they decided to take another route, which was biological warfare. But ultimately, their plan was to clear away any resistance. So, mass amount of free black communities, specifically in the 13 colonies in the Philadelphia area, were destroyed by this biological weapon. All right, let's go.
Benjamin Rush was a prominent doctor, especially when it came to fighting yellow fever. He
One more thing. Just as now, they use the medical field or doctors to promote this biological weapon through avenues and medias such as so-called testing, they actually were introducing the biological weapon into the community. Once again, since the late 1700s, they've just been perpetrating and running the same play over and over again. A perpetual demonic attack on the children of God, the indigenous people of North America, the Afro-Americans.
He took on a leadership role. He worked for the College of Physicians to identify the fever's causes, develop new treatments, and educate the public about how to avoid contracting it. He refused to flee the city, declaring, "I have resolved to stick to my principles, my practice, and my patients to the last extremity." And he meant it. He kept working even when he contracted the fever himself. However, while Rush's dedication to fighting the disease was no doubt sincere, his results often left a little something to be desired. During the epidemic, Benjamin Rush observed that immigrants from the French West Indies didn't seem to contract yellow fever. From this, he concluded that black men and women were immune to the disease, writing, "From the accounts of the yellow fever, which had been published by many writers, I was..."
Now, once again, people, if you're paying close attention, when this whole COVID outbreak began, they used those same words. Black people were supposedly immune to this outbreak. But then shortly after, it became those same black people that were the number one victims in America, at least. So as you see, people, they running the same wordplay, the same game over and over again. But this time, through the grace and truth of the Most High and His Son, Jesus Christ, we seeing what's going on. We're showing it to you. All you have to do is just pay attention a little bit, people, and all truth will be revealed.
was led to believe that the black population in our city would escape it. Rush widely publicized his theory, which ultimately wound up doing more harm than good because, well, it just wasn't true. The immigrants Rush studied had likely developed an immunity to yellow fever after previous exposure.
Now, these West Indians or these Haitians, these islanders, were the initial guinea pigs of this experiment, excuse me. But while some people were used as guinea pigs, others was used as facilitators, collaborators. People such as Absalom Jones, excuse me. Now I know people who familiar with black history gonna get upset when I mention black names and mention that these black people were conspiring against us with this confederation just as the others. But like I said, the truth must come out, people. These Moors were heavy contributors in the disenfranchisement of the indigenous people of America. And speaking a little bit about these Moors and these Moorish communities. But let's roll on.
In the West Indies, where the disease was widespread. The free black people living in Philadelphia at the time didn't really share that immunity. Unfortunately, they listened to Rush. After Rush proclaimed that black people were immune,
Free, healthy, land-owning black people, Afro-Americans. All they really wanted to do was remove them from their land, remove them from their livelihood, and remove them from their God and their birthright.
to yellow fever, members of a religious organization called the Free African Society voluntarily offered to furnish nurses to attend to the afflicted. Their usual mission was to provide aid exclusively to free Africans and their
You
descendants.
see what you boule
But they were so
face
touched
ass
by the strife throughout
was
the
doing.
city, they were
Pay
willing to
attention,
make
though.
an exception. Sadly, this act of selflessness would cost them. The volunteers quickly began to fall ill, and Rush realized he was wrong about their immunity. He somberly admitted he had been mistaken, writing, "The black
Wrong, but thousands of lives was taken. It's all a game to these satanic forces. But the game and the gig and the jig is up. Let's go.
black people took the disease in common with the white people, and many of them passed." 2 months into the epidemic, Benjamin Rush began promoting a treatment, blood leaching. He recommended removing the blood and the purging of the patient's system by administering mercury.
Basically introducing infected vectors into the community, labeling it as testing or as a cure. Sound like vaccination to me, but at this point they wasn't as good with biological manipulation as they are now, so they use what's known as vectors, biological life forms to carry and transmit disease to the human life form. Trying to make this simple and not get all technical and scientifical up in this thing. But all right, let's go.
Rush insisted the treatment would save lives, but not everyone believed him. Journalist William Cobbett called Rush a quack. In all fairness to Rush, he probably sincerely believed his own science. When he himself took ill with yellow fever, he administered his own treatment and lived. In the absence of a verifiable explanation,
The same old game. I myself even took the treatment. Dr. Fauci face ass people. Pay attention, people. All of this is playing out right now, right before our eyes, verbatim.
Founding fathers strongly disagreed over what was causing the outbreak. Benjamin Rush suggested rotten food being sold at the wharf was infecting people via miasma, the now debunked
The wharf,
theory that
as in
disease spread
the
via
ports
bad
which they
smell
was trying to
from
take
polluted
over.
air. However, Alexander Hamilton, who was not throwing away his shot to win the argument, believed the disease was being spread by white refugees fleeing conflicts in the Caribbean. The two also argued over the best treatment. Rush recommended bloodletting and mercury purges. Hamilton, on the other hand, promoted what was called the West Indian treatment, which was
This mercury treatment. We're going to come back to this mercury treatment because a name that we should all become familiar with, which is Walter Plecker, also introduced mercury treatments to the Afro-American community, squirting it in the baby's eyes and such. But that's a little bit farther down the road. Let's go.
also known as the bark and wine cure. Hamilton's proposed treatment was quinine bark, which, while effective against malaria, didn't actually help with yellow fever. Still, though, Given that he wasn't
Snake
sucking
oil.
blood from the patient while infusing their system with toxic levels of mercury, Hamilton's treatment would have definitely been the
Excuse
lesser
me,
of
I
two
didn't mean to
evils.
laugh, folks, because this is not funny at all. But sometimes you have to laugh to keep from crying. So, yeah, I'm going to just leave that at that. It's not funny, y'all. This is serious. Okay.
Given how little was known about the cause of the outbreak, the founding fathers who stayed to work on the problem kept a very open mind. Benjamin Rush even
Constitutional
considered the possibility
signature
that the illness had come
people.
from space, noting that just before the outbreak began, a meteor was seen at 2 o'clock in the morning on or about the 12th of September.
From space, huh?
Well, that sounds like a pretty good basis
Everywhere
for a sci-fi
but
movie.
from the
Not every
devil
suggestion
himself.
he had was so fantastic. Rush
I keep on saying this. I got to say it over and over again. All you have to do is just pay attention a little, people. Just a little. And this is all being laid out verbatim through their sources. Notice I'm using history. I'm not using my opinion. And I shall continue to try to provide historical proof, because it is through this truth and history that the devil will be destroyed. We must all come back home, though, folks. You know, once again, being an indigenous or Afro-American is not ensuring you a ticket on this ride. You have to be with Jesus Christ and with the Father, the Most High. You have to come back home and come back to God. Let's go on, people.
later decided that the culprit was more likely to be a shipment of rotting coffee. Ironically, the source of the yellow fever was right under Rush's nose, and he never even knew it. He noted in journals that mosquitoes were uncommonly numerous during the yellow fever outbreak. Scientists would eventually...
Another common vector, mosquitoes. Google that. That's biological, microbiology, vector, disease.
determined that those mosquitoes were, in fact, the cause of the epidemic. Rush, however, never made the connection. At the time of the epidemic, Philadelphia was arguably the most important city in the United States.
Now let's get to it, folks. Here we go, right here. I mentioned the ports earlier. All of this was just to gain control of the main ports so they can export resources, gold, land deeds, and titles, anything that they can fleece from the people is being laid out right here.
Washington, D.C. was still under construction, so Congress and the President worked out of the city of brotherly love. It also had the busiest port in the nation, which would become the subject of much debate during the outbreak. With goods and people arriving every day, many felt the fever must have made its way into Philly through the port.
Importing foreigners, thugs, gypsies, Moors, exporting the resources and birthright of the indigenous children of America, of God's children. And you think God was just going to sit back and watch this continue? All right. Pay attention. Pay attention.
Both Hamilton and Rush had their eye on it at various points, with Hamilton blaming refugees and Rush blaming polluted goods. The yellow fever outbreak of 1793 brought Philadelphia to its knees. By October, 5,000
All of this
were dead
happened
and another
just a
20,000
couple
had
of
fled.
grandmothers ago.
By the time it was all over, one of the most important populous cities in a
They like to sell us this 1,000-year centuries and to try to divert our mind and our memory from the truth that's occurring right now in front of our face, and that we just recently found ourselves in because we lost sight of the Most High. All of this is current history, but we had to start off in the late 1700s just as an introduction to paint this picture. We're about to get to the bigger picture, though. A little bit more, y'all.
Our new nation was literally decimated. 1 in 10 Philadelphians had died. Samuel Breck later reflected on the fact that the lower classes were, as usual, struck the hardest. According to him, no hospitals were prepared to alleviate the sufferings of the poor, and for a long time nothing could be done other than to furnish coffins and men to bury them. In the end, neither Rush nor Hamilton nor any other doctor was able to figure out the epidemic. It ended by pure luck. when a cold snap killed off most of the mosquito population. So what do you think? How would the founding fathers
Wasn't
handle our
luck.
current epidemic?
Was not
Let us
luck.
know in the comments.
But there you have it, folk. Biological warfare, psychological and physical, implanting fear into the mind of God's children and then hitting them with various biological vectors, all to disenfranchise and take the birthright given to the indigenous children of America by God, the Most High himself. It's time to come back home, people. All you have to do is get in that book. You're going to have to read. We got to read around here. We got to get back to the Word. We have to get back to the Lord Jesus Christ. Open up that Bible, y'all. And until next time, focus daily.